All right. And the third one, before we dive into George Pickens and all the craziness happening with the Pittsburgh Steelers here. Former Cleveland Browns defensive back, Hanford Dixon, which I'm going to be very honest. Okay. I was born in 1996. I got real into football at a young age, but when I first started watching football, when I was, 5, 6 years old, I was a Denver Broncos fan because my dad was a Denver Broncos fan. And, there was no reason for me to have a Steelers game on television because my dad was watching or listening to Broncos games on the internet or on the radio. That's what he was doing. So I was all over the Denver Broncos. Once I started getting a grip on things, once I was actually started to be able to put my own thoughts out there in the NFL, I became a Steelers fan, hardcore Steelers fan. I was a hardcore Steelers fan my entire life until I became a Steelers analyst, Steelers insider with On SI. And from there, I still remain a fan, but I think I'm a fan of the players more than I am and the people more than I am the team. I'm always pro player over anything else because I know these people personally. And at this point, I know they're good dudes. They deserve a lot, both in the building, outside the building, future guys, former guys, doesn't matter. I have no idea who Hanford Dixon is. And when I got this one, all I kept saying was, I have no idea who Hanford Dixon is. Zero idea who Hanford Dixon is. But he said this on Shedeur Sanders and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Quote, they're, as in the Pittsburgh Steelers, gonna pay. I guarantee you Shedeur Sanders is going to make them pay every time we play them. Twice a year, he's going to make them pay. I believe that's a possibility. For sure a possibility. But my thoughts on Shedeur Sanders were the same before the draft as they are right now. I think this draft class stinks at the quarterback position. I don't think it's very good at all. I don't think Shedeur Sanders is a guy that in next year's draft goes in the first 2 rounds, whether his name is Shedeur Sanders or not. If you clone him, name him Will Smith, bad name, name him Joe Smith and toss him out there and give him good interviews, I still think he goes in the 3rd, the 4th round. Shedeur Sanders ain't that guy. And I think there's just as likely as a possibility that Shedeur Sanders is here only because of the Haslams and the owners of the Cleveland Browns than he is because he's good. And I think there's a possibility that if he does not put everything on the field and does not immediately look like a stud, that the Haslams have no control at that point and Shedeur Sanders ends up a free agent. I think that's just as likely as him starting this season. And either could happen, but it is nuts to think that Shedeur Sanders is going to just become this big, giant, I am the greatest of all time quarterback, potentially. But I'm not a guy that sits here and thinks Shedeur Sanders is going to make the Steelers pay. Now, don't get that wrong. Jameis Winston made the Steelers pay, which is, not great. Dorian Thompson-Robinson has made the Steelers pay in the past. Anybody could do it. I don't think the Browns are a terrible football team right now. I really don't. But I think that Myles Garrett, Mason Graham, that's probably about it. Maybe Denzel Ward and Greg Newsome make the Steelers pay more than anybody on the offensive side of the ball. And I have a very, very hard time sitting here saying that Shedeur Sanders is going to be the starting quarterback of the Cleveland Browns this year or the long-term starting quarterback of the Pittsburgh Steelers, but of the Cleveland Browns, But Hanford Dixon, I hope you have a great time. Again, I think Shedeur is a very decent quarterback. I do. I think he's not the worst quarterback in the world, but I also think that in a normal draft class, Shedeur is not a first-round pick, and I've held true to that for quite some time. And we'll see what happens.